Welcome to Slow is Good, a podcast for entrepreneurs who want to think outside of the box to grow slow and have a greater impact. In this podcast, we'll talk everything business, but most importantly, we'll talk slow business, digital strategies, creativity, some Franglish, and a load of human touch. I'm Geraldine Jipe. I'm a Slowpreneur, ex-startup founder. I'll be your host. I'll share ideas, strategies, and more with joy and slowliness.
Hi, everybody. Before to jump into the next episode, I wanted to introduce you to someone.
Hi, I'm Emily Gros from France.
Hey, so together, we decided to co-create a super event, the Slowpreneur Summit in French, Sommet des Slowpreneurs, and it's coming this June from June 12th to June 18th.
It's a week of sharing, content, exploration in slow mode.
So you have one thing to do, just register at sommet-slowpreneur.com, Summit in English, sommet-slowpreneur.com, and enjoy the early bird. So see you next time.
Bye.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Slow is Good. I do have a beautiful guest today, Stephanie Pellet, and she will be talking with me about slowpreneurship and what does it mean for her and how actually it made a difference in her business. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Geraldine. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining today out of your busy schedule. I'm really, really super excited for our conversation. And yeah, I will let you probably give more about yourself and also your background and what actually led you to slowpreneurship.
Well, thank you for having me. This is really, really fun to get to talk to somebody else who sees things in such a similar way. I was saying before we started, it's not the most common way to think about business. So when you can meet someone else who is on the same page, it just feels really, really good. So I'm Steph. I am based in Toronto or near Toronto, and I am a business coach and consultant and community leader for values-based entrepreneurs. So that takes a lot of different forms. I run an online community that I love called The Profoundary, and I do one-on-one coaching. And recently, last year, I also started a podcast called Slowpreneur. I think that's how we found each other because I was feeling like, the pandemic burnt me out. I don't know if anyone else here can relate to that. So I was feeling really burnt out, really tired. My mental health was struggling. And, I'm a person, I feel like very similar to you, whose business really depends on me, how I feel, my habits, my lifestyle, my energy, my mood, that has a direct impact on my business and how I can show up for my clients. So I thought, something needs to change. Something's got to give here because I'm not feeling good. And so my business is not feeling good. And that's not a sustainable way to live and work, right? Mm-hmm. We can't, feel good 100% of the time. And so I started the podcast last year in an attempt to interview interesting people about how they've found better strategies, also explore ideas for myself of how can I take better care of myself and set up my business to also be more sustainable regardless of how I'm feeling. I'm sure that's something that a lot of people listening can relate to, right? So that's kind of my journey to slowpreneurship. It was just this idea that at the time felt like such a balm for my soul. It just was like this thing I really needed. I needed this concept of slowpreneurship, this idea of being more intentional. I've always been intentional in my business, but in a different way now to sort of run my business without neglecting my humanity and who I am, my self-care. So that's kind of my slowpreneurship journey. I love it. I'm still exploring the ideas. I'm actually about to start season 2 of the podcast. So I was really excited when you asked me to have this conversation.
Yeah, and that's pretty amazing because we've seen most of the Francophone community, we've seen a lot of, slowpreneurs like happening and coming, into the community simply because a lot of people were looking at other ways actually to do business without, burning themselves, right? And then we all have our own slowpreneurship, though. That's what I've realized with time. And I wanted to know exactly what slowpreneurship means for you exactly.
Such a good question. I want to ask you the same question, but I think for me, it's sort of about growing a business in a way that is intentional, both inside and out. So inside meaning for the person running the business, and also out for all the people who are experiencing your business. And so it doesn't necessarily mean your business is growing really slowly. I think that's probably a misconception
Yes.
that people have. I don't really care if you're growing your business at the speed of light, as long as it still feels good for you, right? As long as it feels good for you and you're still showing up for your clients or customers in a way that feels good for them. It feels intentional. It feels sustainable. I think sustainable is the word I keep coming back to. So again, if you want to do it really fast, but it feels sustainable for you, I still consider that a form of slowpreneurship. Likewise, you could be, working a full-time job and just doing your business in little bits and pieces on the side. And as long as that's intentional and it feels sustainable for you, that also I consider slowpreneurship. So I think it's more about the mindset that you have with it, more so than the speed of it or the way that anything has to look. But I think it's really about intention and sustainability. And I think for me, the three pieces of sustainability, and I'm still evolving my thinking on this, but the three pieces for me so far are to have better systems in your business. So making sure that things are set up to support you, having a really good strategy for your business, meaning like, what is your business model? Is it sustainable financially and energetically for you? Is your marketing sustainable for you? And also self-care. I think self-care is a piece that sometimes gets left out of the conversation for entrepreneurs. And when it's just you and your business, or you have a small team, the way you take care of yourself is so important. So those are kind of the three pieces for me that are like the practical nitty-gritty part, but the intentionality, I think, is the bigger theme that runs through everything that I do.
I had a couple of ones that I actually added myself as a slowpreneur, which are like the serenity in business as well, just to make sure like, yes, we have all the systems to back the backbone of our businesses, but also just being serene in doing things. But also that principle of, I don't know if that's the right term in English though, but reciprocity. It means like being equal whenever I'm engaging with new customers, making sure that they bring me some values, but I bring them, equal values in order to support them in their own growth. And so for me, it has bring like a different layers and a different dimension to how I run my businesses, and also nature, so that to connect more, being more in tune with, what we have out there that can really help us being more, I will say, humanly sustainable.
Nature is such a cool thing to bring up in this conversation. I think it comes up for me a lot metaphorically when I'm talking to clients, because nature can be such a good teacher for us of slowpreneurship or just entrepreneurship in general. I think we've kind of lost touch with natural seasons and cycles when it comes to most business conversations, right? Most business conversations are about what do venture capitalists want to see? Constant growth. They want to see that line that just goes to the upper right-hand corner of the graph in a continuous linear fashion. And nothing in nature does that. That's not a thing. That's not a thing. And I think we're seeing now so many businesses that are realizing that that's not possible. They've been funded with venture capital. They are trying to deliver that nonstop continuous growth. And they're starting to realize that, we actually can't sustain this. I mean, we're seeing this with Netflix, right? In order to continue their constant growth and show their stakeholders that they can continue to grow, they're now cracking down on accounts in Canada. So now instead of people having these accounts that they're sharing, they decided that's not enough for us. We need every single one of you to have your own account so we can keep showing those numbers. What happens when you run out of people? At some point, enough has to be enough. And so I don't know, I just really like that you brought up nature and that idea that we can look to nature if we're not seeing results in a certain period of time, if it's a slower time in our business for sales or new clients, that we don't have to feel bad about that. We don't actually have to buy into this idea that constant growth is the norm. We just have to look out our window and just see
Yeah.
still snow and there's still things like growing
Exactly.
out of the ground, you know?
Particularly like in Canada, right? Like we have
Yeah.
very marked and defined and well-defined seasons, right? The winter is
Yes.
very absolutely different from spring and from the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
are you able to this day, or are you still trying to figure how to plan your business according to the seasons? Or is this something that you're
Mm.
exploring?
Such a great question. So I feel like there are small ways that I do this in my business, kind of like all the time. So, for instance, in a week, I always take off Mondays and Fridays from calls. I never do calls on Mondays or Fridays. So then I know, I can wake up in the morning and I only am doing internal facing work in my business.
Mm-hmm.
And I can wake up on Tuesday and know, okay, client day, I'm ready to talk to people. Or community day. Wednesdays are generally my community day. That's when I'm talking to a lot of people. So having that differentiation has made a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
I also do seasons, quote unquote, in the month. So this week in my business, the first week of every month, I don't do any calls except for things like this, where it's like a podcast, right? But nothing really client facing. I would do my own projects, my own marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something, first of all, this is not something I started when I first started my business. This
Yeah.
has been an evolving process, and I'm constantly tweaking it. But that makes a huge difference for me, because then I know, okay, first week I'm doing really like deep work. I'm doing things that have to do with like building for the future, and I have that break. In terms of the actual physical seasons, I don't necessarily plan it in advance, apart from trying to plan time off.
Mm-hmm.
So I have time off that I book at the beginning of the year. And for me, I'm like kind of a repetitive sort of person. So for me, they tend to be just the same time every year. Like I take 2 weeks off in December and 1 week off in April, 1 week off in October, and a couple weeks off in the summer. So it's like I have those rhythms already to my year that I can just replicate each year. And then I do notice, winter for sure is slower. I don't necessarily plan for it, but it's like, you're going to notice your energy is just not what it used to be. And you kind of have to respond to that. So I'm really working on not forcing myself to be, there's this phrase I love, which is, you are not a robot. I say it constantly on my own podcast. So I'm really working on not forcing myself to be the same every day, every week, every month, every year. But it's a process for sure. And I think the place I'm also sort of like a growth edge for me is exploring my menstrual cycle. So trying to figure out what parts of the month are better for different kinds of energy. I have not cracked that code yet, but it's something I'm interested in looking into more.
You probably might have read about Kate Northrup, Do Less book, maybe. And I haven't
read that book, but I know her. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, delved a little bit in her teachings in that, in order to be able to, calibrate my work around cycles when I have the peak of energy and less energy, so that I can actually tap into the most efficient time during the month of my business planning. Now, when it comes to that, for us, I mean, just listening to all your answers and all your sharings is just music to my ears, literally. And I feel like people cannot see my face, but I'm literally so happy and excited to have this conversation. But there's also some reality. We understand each other. We understand our sense of slowpreneurship, right? But how does it come into play in the reality for people that are actually not slowpreneurs? And you might have clients that might not be slowpreneurs as well. So how does it work for you in that sense?
So helping people kind of overcome the challenges that they might face getting to this point. Yeah, it's a process. I think, I mentioned those 3 pieces before: the strategy, the systems, the self-care. I kind of see them more as not like a checklist to get through, right? Like you do one, you do the next, and then you're done, but more so a diagnostic tool. So if you're struggling with something in your business, and a lot of my clients might be struggling with something, they don't feel that they have a slow business or an intentional business per se. So we might just start by looking at those categories, right? So, okay, well, how are your systems? Is there a system that would help you right now? And for me, a system could be a tool, like an actual piece of software or an app or a website, but it can also just be a process, something that is replicable, that you do in your business that supports you, a policy, right? So, how quickly do you respond to email, or do you use a scheduler to schedule your client calls rather than sending a million emails back and forth? And so it's sort of an incremental process, right? If somebody is overwhelmed, they feel like, okay, the distance between where I am now and what you're talking about, having like a no call week every month, that's a really big distance, right? But we have to start to gain tiny little bits of our brain back, like the ability to be proactive is such an important part of business. And I think we spend so much of our time reacting to things, especially when we're first starting out, right? It's like, what does that client want? What does this email say? What is this task telling me to do? And so you're spending all your time reacting to things. And so I think that the way to get over these challenges is to just buy yourself back these tiny little bits of proactivity. So if you can set up a scheduler in your business, you take like an hour on a Monday someday and you just, ignore all the emails and you set up the scheduler. Wow, you've just bought yourself back potentially hours of time for the next month, right? What can you do with that time? What is the next step? So it's like, it's just this little process, right? Now I have these hours. What do I want to do with them? Oh, okay. I realize I'm getting the same questions every single email. Maybe I need to put together an FAQ page so people can answer their own emails. Maybe I need to put together a client guide book. So when they start working with me, they have all their questions answered up front and I don't have to spend all my time in email. A lot of these examples are email specific because I feel like your email inbox is like a real drain on people's energy. But this could be in any part of your business that's feeling like a drain. And I think from there, it's again, you're making these small investments that will allow you to have more brain space, have more proactivity, be able to plan for the future, be able to schedule your time. Even when it comes to scheduling, right? I see a lot of people when they're first starting out, they set up their scheduler. That's amazing. Their scheduler is just every day of the week, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, right? Because that's the default that they set up for you. But what if you don't want to be doing random calls like Monday at 9 a.m. and then Thursday at 6 p.m.? Okay, now we're just going to like make it a little smaller. Maybe you just decide, okay, I'm going to do Wednesday, Thursday, Friday instead of Monday to Friday. I think that the piece though that needs to be said now that I've said all that stuff is, again, it comes back to mindset, because the number one thing that is holding people back from making these kinds of changes is having a sense of scarcity. And that's very normal when you start your business. It's like, if I'm not available 24/7, 365, I'm not going to be able to get clients, sell products, whatever you might be doing in your business. And I think it's really important, like the first decision we all have to make when we're starting our business is to not buy that hype, to not believe that story that unless you're constantly available and constantly bending over backwards, that you are not going to be successful. You can't be successful if you burn out, right? By definition. And so setting up systems, processes, boundaries from the beginning, even though it requires some faith, it requires some trust that that's going to actually still allow you to succeed. It's such an important mindset shift to just go to abundance and say, there will be more clients. There will be more opportunities. If I don't answer this email at 11 p.m., this client will not fire me. I promise myself, I promise you, they're not going to fire you just because you didn't email them at midnight. And if they do, move on to the next one, So I think that mindset shift is really important to make in order to make any of these other changes.
Absolutely. And I think it's also, kind of redesigning the definition of running a business in the online business consulting industries as well, because actually, indeed, like people were reachable all the time, but reality is you're not supposed to be reachable all the time, because like somebody calling you at 8 p.m., how does it do good for yourself and for your business? So these are the real questions. But then I received a couple of questions and I'm going to ask you,
okay,
is it possible to be a slowpreneur and to be profitable?
For sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, I think that it has nothing to do with how many hours you work, right? Or how, how, how you're laughing. So you're making me laugh.
I am so sorry, and I have to interrupt you here. And because I receive so many comments, like sometimes offensive comments, stating that,
Mm.
"Oh yeah, it's your husband supporting you. Oh yeah, it's your
Oh,
yeah, yeah." So that's the reason why I wanted to have that conversations, and actually with all the women and men that are considering themselves as slowpreneurs, actually most of them are more profitable by slowing down, and then
for
on
sure.
top of that, they're enjoying life.
100%. I also would say to those commenters, like, you do realize that all of the major businesses that you think are so successful are all being supported by quote unquote business husbands, right? Like, venture capital is literally keeping 99% of these businesses afloat. Like, look at Uber, look at WeWork, look at Netflix, look at any of the businesses that you admire,
Yeah.
and most of the time they are not profitable. You can look this up. Netflix
Yeah.
has so much debt,
Yeah.
it is unbelievable. And so a lot of them are running at a loss, a lot of them are not profitable.
Yeah.
So it's like the stories that we have, right? They literally have quote unquote rich husbands. They have people who are just funneling money towards them for them to
Exactly.
keep going.
Yeah.
So I think it's so interesting when that critique gets brought in on like a small scale, on an individual scale, without understanding the context that that is how a lot of big business actually works, which I don't actually think is considered profitable. To me, that's not profitable. If you're constantly getting money funneled to you
Yeah.
by other people who have money, you're not actually running a profit. So they need to do some research, first of all. Second of all, I agree with you. I think that profit has everything to do with literally how much money you're making and how much money you're spending, right? That's literally the definition of profit. And so that, that has nothing to do with the way that you run your business.
Yeah.
You could have fast businesses that are profitable. I'm using fast, but
Yeah.
I'm using it as a metaphor. Regular businesses, the typical traditional style of business. You could have a traditional business that is profitable or unprofitable. You could have a slow business that is profitable or unprofitable. It's really not about that. It's about the decisions that you make and the way that you're running it.
Yeah.
So I think that it's just a silly critique. Like, I know a lot of businesses that are very profitable, and I would consider them intentional slow businesses. And my business is profitable. Like, it's not about that at all. It's about the decisions that you make when you're running your business. Now, when you're first starting out, are you going to be able to 100% make a living if you're just a solopreneur? Maybe not. It might take you time. It might be a process of gaining your audience and gaining your clients, and reducing your expenses and making sure that you are running a profit, that you can support yourself. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight, but to question whether that premise is possible is just silly. Like, that is a silly kind of question that you're getting.
And I totally agree with that. So at first I was offended. Then I realized that it's because it's not as common to talk about slowpreneurship. And I think that's
For sure.
a very important conversation that we are having, because I think it's time just to put in perspective that we're burning everything, like in the way that most of businesses are running these days. Like, we're burning resources, and multiple, like, human resources, material, like, resources. And for us, I think as slowpreneurs, it's also putting into perspective how we can do better, doing maybe less but better, but doing also with less materials, being maybe more eco-friendly, even in our online businesses. I don't know for you, but I was looking at what are the ways that I can be more sustainable with my small business. So meaning, like, maybe thinking about my hosting, maybe I could migrate to more sustainable systems or operators. And there are all these conversations that come into play as well, I believe, when it comes to slowpreneurship.
That is such an important point. I think I have this belief that I've always said the long game is the only game in town, meaning that things don't actually happen overnight. And if they are happening overnight, you are probably not going to be able to sustain that, right? So if the long game or the slow game is the only game in town, what I mean by that is you can be running your business at this fast clip, burning yourself out, answering emails at every time of day and night. You will not last. And this is something I talk about because it's actually not a joke. Like, it's not like just a thing I'm saying. I lived in Toronto for many years. I have seen businesses come and go. I'm sure you see this in Montreal too. Storefronts that are like rotating over, businesses that started and then stopped within a year.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's because the person decided to do something different, but most of the time in the stories that I can think of, it is because the person was burned out and they didn't know how to keep going.
Yeah.
So that is like a tragedy for me, because I think most people who start businesses, it's because they have a really good reason for it. Like, there's something that they can give the world that's like a magical thing that the world needs, product, service, whatever. And so to see those businesses go under because they were not sustainable for the person running them, I think is really sad. But it's also proof. It's also proof that these ways of running a business that we've all been modeled, and again, going back to that conversation around constant growth and constant being available, bending over backwards constantly, we can see now that will not last. And so if you want your business to last, you have to be thinking in this way. If you want to build a legacy, right? If you want to have work that outlives you or can get bigger than you or touch lots of people, you actually, it's like a responsibility to your business and to your clients, right? To make sure that you can continue. Yeah. So it's like, if there's any part of your business that you're looking at right now and you're thinking, I don't know how long I could keep going with this or with that, that's something to look at. And I think something to start making changes on, because as you're saying, it's like, it's just not going to work. Like, I don't know how to explain it any differently, right? Like, people are like, well, is this a good option? I'm like, it's kind of the only option. Yeah. That's how I really, truly feel, because you can try, but how long are you actually going to be able to keep that up? 3 years, 4, 5 at a stretch, and then it's over, So I think it's like, this is really the only option that we all have. You can call it slow, you can call it something else if you don't like that word, but intentional business that you're thinking about the long game and planning for the future, that is really the option that we have available to us. And it's just practical. Yeah, I think it's not fanciful. It's just practical.
Yeah, totally. And then I was discussing with my co-host for the French series of the Slowpreneur Summit coming soon. And then we were actually like seeing that in our statistics, there's so many impacts when it comes to fast-paced businesses. More people like burned out, more disease, very, really serious disease, depressions and stuff. So, I mean, this is a reason of, at least for me, of slowpreneurship. But what would you say to a fast-paced like business today, so that they can embrace maybe anything intentional, slow, even I want to call it slow, something that will be more sustainable for the longevity of the business, but also all the resources, the planet, their teams. How would you encourage them actually to, to make the shift?
There's this phrase I love, and I think it comes from the US Navy. I'm sure you've heard it, which is that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So what that means to me is that we can try to be fast. You can try and make everything fast and do everything fast. As we've discussed, it's not going to succeed. You're going to have people leaving your company. You're going to have people burning out, being on mental health leave. If you are actually concerned about growing, if you are actually concerned about, getting more sales, you should be concerned about helping people feel like they can keep going in this job. I know businesses personally, like people who work for companies where they've had almost a 100% turnover rate in a year in the department.
What?
Every week they're getting an email about somebody leaving the job because the work environment is so toxic.
Yeah.
So when you think about companies, and you think about what is the most expensive thing, right? It's people. It's finding the right people. It's hiring. That takes up so much time. It's such a big problem. And I just can't understand how the business could not be seeing the forest for the trees with that, like I get it. You have short-term projects you want to make happen. But if you keep working at that pace, you're going to constantly be hemorrhaging good talent and good people. You're going to be wasting good resources, wasting good people. They're going to leave you. And so I just don't understand that even from a practical perspective, if your focus is on growth, if your focus is on sales, it is in your best interest to keep good people. It is in your best interest to have a good environment. It is in your best interest to take care of everyone and the planet and everything that you're working with. Like, it's really baffling to me that even if we're looking at this from a purely practical perspective, people don't see that this is actually the most practical option. It's just a little counterintuitive because it's not what you immediately think of, but it is the most practical way to grow a business. It is the most practical way to keep good staff and take care of them. So I just... that's what I would say. I'm like, this is the fastest way to grow, actually. I think it's the fastest way to grow. So if that's what you're concerned about, this is what you have to prioritize.
Yeah, I mean, people's retention, especially these days after post-pandemic, it's very important.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I see too many companies that are constantly trying to hire, but it's been so challenging. And because people don't feel as safe in companies anymore. And so that's the reason why bringing slowpreneurship, we can call it slowpreneurship again, we can call it like different ways, but being more, I will say, aligned with our humanness, I think it's important for a change and make sure that we grow businesses that will last the longest possible, but with also nice policies, nice engagement, and nice commitment for an evolution with people, not just, and I mean, there's so many things that we could touch, but I really enjoy our conversation. And absolutely, you'll have to come back. But what would be your last word on your journey so far when it comes to slowpreneurship?
What a fun question. I think that what I have found the most inspiring or helpful about this journey is just recognizing that it's okay to feel good while you're doing your work in the world, and it will actually help you do more of it. I actually feel great. I've been taking care of myself really since the beginning of the year in a more intentional way. And I actually have so much more energy for my business. I have more energy for the offerings. I'm doing a retreat coming up. I just created a product. Like, these are things where last year I was trying to force myself to do them when I didn't have the energy. I was trying to force myself to show up on social media. So again, with that kind of counterintuitive thing I was talking about, that taking care of yourself and like taking a step back to make sure that you're really set up for success. It's sort of like you take 2 steps back to go 10 steps forward. It rapidly accelerates the energy that you have. Not that I think we should be taking care of ourselves just to be productive. Obviously, you also want to be living your life and enjoying your life, which you've talked about already in this conversation as well. But if your goal is to be able to put more towards your business and your clients and your customers, then it actually is the fastest possible way to do that is taking care of yourself. So I think even on an individual level, I've noticed that. And that's been really cool to see. Like, I actually want to get on social media now. I didn't want to last year. I could not, get near it with a 10-foot pole. And now I feel completely different. And if I had just kept forcing myself, I don't think I would have ever gotten there. But because I took a step back and took care of myself instead, I got there. And the other thing that I would say about slowpreneurship is just getting to connect with amazing people like you. It's been so fun. I want to have you on my podcast if you're down, because I just think, getting to talk to people who think in this way and having these kind of conversations has actually really fueled me as well to, business involves so much faith. It involves so much trust in what you're doing, you kind of have to take that leap of faith and just trust that it's going to work out. And getting to talk to other people who see things the same way I do or have different experiences has been such an amazing way to like keep that trust for myself and keep going. So yeah, thank you for this. This has been wonderful.
It's been so amazing. One more thing. So where people can find out about you?
Okay, sure. So you can learn more about me at stephaniepellet.com. That's 2 L's, 2 T's. Or you can search for my podcast. It's called Slowpreneur, Business Without the Busy. And I love to have conversations like this. Geraldine will be on my podcast now officially, so that'll be fun. But those are kind of the main places to find me all over the social medias. You know, they know the way it is, but yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the last episode of Slow is Good. Thanks for showing some love. Please share it with your community and your loved ones. Don't hesitate to follow us on social media, on Instagram at Slow is Good. Please share your reviews, feedback, and add some listed stars on iTunes and Spotify. This is very useful for us and to support us and for us to keep on going. I'll see you next time.